All right, so are you ready to dive into a phrase that's become kind of a hot topic these days?
Oh, yeah. Hit me with it.
It's follow the science.
Okay. Follow the science.
We're going deep on this one with a blog post from the Einganeer's line,
Interesting.
where the Einganeer, he's an engineer himself.
Okay.
He really takes a hard look at this whole idea of follow the science and, whether it's really as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, because we hear it everywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that even mean?
And that's what I like about this post. He gets into like the nitty-gritty
Uh-huh.
of how engineers specifically approach this idea.
Okay. Yeah.
And he makes a point that's pretty interesting.
Okay.
He says engineering isn't just about blindly following scientific principles. It's about using those principles in a very particular way.
Using them.
Yeah, and he uses this phrase, practical application.
Practical
I
application.
think that's really key here.
It is because you can know a whole bunch of science-y stuff.
Right.
But like if you can't actually make something with it or make it work,
Right.
then who cares?
Exactly.
Like, what's the point?
Yeah, and he even makes this kind of funny comparison.
What's that?
He talks about engineers versus what he calls homers.
Homers.
And I think he's referring to people who don't really get that practical side of things,
So like the people who maybe just know the theory.
Yeah, the theory, but they couldn't actually build it.
Right. They can't actually like apply it.
Exactly. And what's funny is he even admits that he struggled with this himself.
Really?
Yeah, he talks about this experience he had in college
Okay.
where he almost failed organic chemistry.
Oof.
Yeah, which would have totally derailed his engineering path.
Oh, for sure.
But he found a way to make it work. And he says that experience really shaped his whole approach to engineering.
So how did he connect that experience to engineering in general?
Well, he makes this argument that engineers actually often find themselves like pushing the boundaries of scientific understanding.
So not just taking it for granted.
Yeah, not just passively accepting it. And he even says straight up engineers challenge science rather than just following it.
Whoa. Okay, he's making some bold statements here.
He is. And to illustrate this, he uses an example I think we can all relate to.
All right, lay it on me.
Going to the doctor.
Okay, going to the doctor.
We tend to put doctors on this pedestal,
They know everything.
Exactly. They have all the answers because of science.
Right, right.
But he points out that even in medicine, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of dealing with probabilities and statistics.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing's ever 100% certain.
And he brings up this idea of, doctors giving diagnoses in percentages.
Like you have a such and such chance of developing this.
Exactly. You have a 30% chance of developing this condition.
Yeah.
But from the patient's perspective,
Uh-huh.
it either happens or it doesn't.
It's a yes or a no?
It's their reality.
Yeah, it's not really a percentage to them.
Exactly. And that's where he draws this parallel to engineering.
Okay, I'm interested to hear this.
He says, for engineers, there's no maybe.
No wiggle room.
A bridge either stands or it collapses.
Exactly.
A plane flies or it crashes.
I see.
Very high stakes.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying engineers have to be more concrete in their thinking,
Yeah.
more focused on results than on just theoretical possibilities.
Okay, I get that.
They have to find solutions that actually work, period.
Right. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Exactly. And that's
Wow.
what he says often leads engineers to question established scientific principles,
To kind of push the limits.
to push the limits of what's considered possible.
Yeah. So where does he go with this?
Well, this is where things get really interesting
Okay.
because he uses the COVID-19 pandemic as a case study.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty timely.
Yeah, he talks about how everyone was told to follow the science
Right.
when it came to pandemic measures.
Mm-hmm.
But then he questions whether that approach really took into account the practical realities of the situation.
I mean, it was such a complex situation.
It was. And he specifically points to the fact that even with all the measures,
The lockdowns and
yeah, all of that, a significant number of people still died from the virus.
especially older people.
Yeah, particularly in older age groups.
Right.
And he even throws out this statement I thought was pretty provocative.
What's that?
He says, if only more of those workers not sent home had been engineers.
That's interesting. What do you think he means by that?
Well, it makes me wonder, what do you consider essential work?
Yeah.
And how did that definition change during the pandemic?
Yeah, because we were kind of forced to reevaluate that.
We were, and I think he's hinting at the idea that engineers with their problem-solving skills
Right.
and their ability to apply scientific knowledge in practical ways,
Yeah.
that they might have been able to offer different solutions.
Solutions that maybe took into account more than just the virus itself.
Exactly. Maybe ones that better balance those public health concerns with the economic and social impacts.
Right, because those were huge.
They were huge. And it makes you think, if we had taken a more engineering-driven approach to the pandemic, would the outcomes have been different?
It's hard to say, but it's an interesting question.
It is, and it really challenges us to think about what following the science really means,
Does it mean blindly doing whatever experts say?
right? Or is there a role for critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and really considering the practical implications of scientific recommendations?
I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, it's like he's saying science is important, but it's not the only factor to consider when making decisions.
Especially decisions that affect so many people.
Exactly. Decisions with huge consequences for individuals and for society as a whole.
Yeah, so maybe it's not about just blindly following, but about using science as a tool.
As a tool.
One of many tools.
Right. And I think that's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
Science is powerful, but it's how we use it that ultimately matters.
And sometimes that means looking beyond just the purely scientific aspects of a situation.
Right.
Thinking about the human element, the practical side, the potential consequences that we don't always see right away.
And that's what I like about the Einganeer. He has this very specific view on the relationship between science and engineering. And it emphasizes this practical application and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
I'm really curious to hear what else he has to say.
Me too. So
Yeah.
let's see where he takes this next.
All right, let's do it. Well, he doesn't really dive into a lot of other examples specifically, but he does say this one thing that really stuck with me.
Okay, what's that?
He says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but he says that if more people in charge, like decision makers,
Okay.
were engineers,
Uh-huh.
we'd probably see a very different approach to solving problems, like in general.
Like a different way of thinking?
Yeah, like less focus on ideology and more focus on what actually works.
It sounds like he's advocating for a more pragmatic approach.
Totally, a more evidence-based way of making decisions.
Not just in government, but like in all areas of life.
I think so, yeah. He
Yeah.
seems to be suggesting that we could all benefit from thinking a little bit more like engineers do.
Focusing on solutions instead of getting lost in these like theoretical debates.
Exactly, and that goes back to his point about homers versus engineers.
Right.
Like, we need a good balance of both perspectives to really tackle these complex issues we're facing.
It's not that one perspective is better than the other. It's that we need,
We need different ways of thinking.
variety
Yeah, diversity of thought.
to find solutions that actually work
For sure. And he does mention one other area where he sees this kind of tension.
between following the science and the practical considerations.
Exactly. What's that?
Climate change.
Climate change, of course. Yeah, he talks about how the whole debate gets framed as you either believe the science or you deny it.
Right. Like it's black and white.
Yeah, but he says it's way more nuanced than that.
So even if we all agree on the science,
Mm-hmm.
there's still room for debate on how to actually deal with it.
Right, and that's where the engineering mindset comes in, I think.
Okay, I like that.
He's all about solutions, finding practical ways to actually reduce emissions and deal with the effects of climate change.
So instead of arguing about whose science is better,
Right.
let's actually do something.
Yeah, let's get our hands dirty.
Roll up our sleeves
Yeah.
and find solutions.
And that goes back to his main point about engineering.
It's taking scientific knowledge and turning it into something real, something that actually makes a difference.
Right, and I think that's so relevant today because we're facing so many big, complicated problems.
And we need that engineering mindset, that ability to
Yeah.
bridge the gap between the theory and actually doing something about it.
I totally agree. And going back to this idea of challenging science,
Yeah.
do you think he's saying we should just be skeptical of all science?
I don't think he's saying we should be skeptical of everything, but I do think he's encouraging a healthy dose of critical thinking.
Okay, so not just taking things at face value because someone says science says.
Exactly. It's about asking questions, digging a little deeper, not just blindly accepting things.
I think that's an important distinction.
It is, because it's not about rejecting science altogether. It's about engaging with it in a more critical and informed way.
So maybe that's what truly following the science means.
Maybe.
It's not just about listening to authority figures, it's about understanding the science itself.
The limitations
The potential for bias, all of that.
and being an active participant.
Yeah, asking questions.
Demanding evidence.
Exactly. And I think that's what I appreciate about the Einganeer's perspective.
What do you mean?
He's not afraid to question things.
Even the sacred cow of science.
Yeah. He points out that experts can get things wrong.
That data can be misinterpreted,
Yeah.
that conclusions can be flawed.
Right. And he's not doing it to be mean or to deny science.
He's trying to get us to think about it in a more sophisticated way
To understand how science actually works.
and how we should let it inform our decisions.
Yeah, like we need a bit more humility, I think,
A little bit of humility.
to admit that we don't have all the answers.
And that we're always learning.
Exactly. And that's what I find so interesting about this whole conversation.
It's not just about learning new facts
It's about questioning what we think we know.
and expanding our understanding of how the world works.
I'm totally with you on that. And it's about being open to new ideas, even if they make us uncomfortable.
That's a good point. Being comfortable with uncertainty and recognizing that the journey is just as important as the destination.
Exactly. And speaking of journeys, are you ready to wrap this one up?
I think so. I think it's time to give our listeners something to think about.
What's your final thought?
You know what's really sticking with me is that idea of practical application.
Yeah.
It seems like that's at the heart of everything the Einganeer is talking about.
It's not just about knowing stuff.
Right.
It's about what you can actually do with it.
Exactly. And I love how he connects that to engineering.
It's like knowledge without action is kind of meaningless.
Like potential energy just waiting to be released.
Exactly.
And it makes me think about how we can apply that Einganeer mindset to our own lives.
Even if we're not engineers.
Right? Like, what does it mean to be an Einganeer in everyday life?
I think it starts with curiosity, you know?
Asking questions,
Yeah, and looking for ways to solve problems.
big or small,
Exactly. And not being afraid to try things out, experiment a little.
even if we mess up,
Yeah. Learn from your mistakes.
and be willing to challenge how things are done.
To think outside the box a little.
Push the boundaries.
Find those creative solutions that maybe other people haven't thought of.
He even talks about how engineers have to make decisions with incomplete information sometimes,
Oh, yeah, that's a big part of it.
weighing risks and benefits.
Finding that balance between doing something new and making sure it's safe.
It's not about being reckless. It's about calculated risks
Trusting your gut.
and your problem-solving skills.
It's like what the world needs more of right now.
People who are willing to jump in and figure things out,
Get their hands dirty.
find those practical solutions.
These are the problems we're all facing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Einganeer's blog, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
Ooh, I like a good challenge.
It's simple. Find your inner Einganeer.
Find your inner Einganeer.
Look around you, your world, your community, your own life even,
Okay.
and ask yourself, what problems need solving,
What can I do to make things a little bit better?
even if it's a small thing.
It doesn't have to be huge.
It could be fixing something, helping someone out, coming up with a better way to do something,
It's about that mindset, you know,
taking action.
applying what you know to make a difference.
And who knows, maybe it'll inspire others to do the same.
Start a chain reaction
Spread that Einganeer spirit.
of innovation and problem solving.
Wouldn't that be something?
It would be pretty amazing.
So to all our listeners out there, go forth and Einganeer.
And if you come up with any cool solutions, let us know.
Share your stories on social media.
Or send us an email.
We love hearing from you.
We're always looking for inspiration.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing
And keep diving deep.
into the world of knowledge and ideas.